The records show something unusual. Not silence, not chaos, not collapse. Something was absent. What disappeared was weight. The weight of deeds done and actions left untaken. In this world, people remembered everything they had done. Every word, every decision, every harm. But none of it pressed forward. The past no longer leaned into the present. It simply sat behind it, perfectly intact, perfectly harmless. This is a record of a world where regret no longer existed, a world that believed this was progress. And for a time, it was. The absence didn't announce itself. It blended in. At first, nothing seemed broken. People could recount their mistakes with precision. Dates were correct, details intact. They remembered who they hurt, when it happened, and why. What they no longer felt was the pressure to sit with it. Memory functioned, reflection did not. There was no hesitation before repeating old patterns, no pause before familiar harm. Not because people forgot, but because nothing inside them insisted they stop. Regret had once been the force that slowed decisions just enough to reconsider. When it disappeared, life became smoother, faster, cleaner. And smoother things are rarely questioned. Over time, memory changed its role. It stopped shaping behavior and began documenting it. Past conflicts were discussed like archived footage, accurate, emotionless. I remember that, people would say. Not with sorrow, not with pride, only certainty. Apologies became unnecessary, not because people believed they had done no harm, but because harm no longer demanded response. Mistakes were acknowledged, then shelved. Language adapted. I was wrong became, that occurred. I wish I hadn't became, given what I knew then. The past became something to reference, not something to learn from. And because nothing hurt, nothing compelled revision. History was preserved perfectly. Its lessons were not. In this world, consequences still existed. They were recorded, enforced, and remembered, but they were no longer internalized. People adjusted behavior the way systems do, by compliance, not by reflection. If an action produced harm, it was noted. If it produced penalty, it was avoided next time. But the action itself was never reconsidered. People learned what worked, not what was right. They avoided outcomes, not causes. They corrected for efficiency, not for meaning. A person could look directly at the damage they caused and feel no urge to repair it. Only an understanding of how to avoid repeating the inconvenience. The record showed everything. The conscience, nothing. Relationships adapted first. Arguments ended cleanly, without resolution. Words were said, reactions logged, and then both parties moved on. Not reconciled, not changed, simply finished. No one revisited old conversations. There was nothing to revisit. Grief became precise. Loss was acknowledged with accuracy. Dates remembered, circumstances preserved, but mourning shortened. There was no lingering sense that something should have been different. No weight pulling memory back into the present. People returned to routine quickly, not because they were strong, but because nothing held them there. Even joy flattened. Achievements were noted, celebrated briefly, and archived. There was satisfaction, but no reflection on cost. Without regret, success no longer asked what it required, only whether it worked. Over time, people began to trust their decisions completely. Not because those decisions were wise, but because there was no internal mechanism left to dispute them. Confidence rose. Humility faded. And when mistakes repeated, as they often did, they did so cleanly, without embarrassment, without hesitation, without learning. In time, people stopped revisiting their inner lives, not because they were forbidden to, but because there was nothing there that asked to be returned to. Thoughts no longer circled back. Memories did not linger. The mind became efficient, forward-moving, uncluttered. Decisions were made quickly, and just as quickly, sealed. There was no private rehearsal of alternatives, no quiet reckoning with what might have been done differently. People trusted the present version of themselves completely because there was no emotional evidence left to contradict it. Doubt faded. Not the loud kind, but the subtle kind that once whispered caution. That voice had been regret, and without it, certainty felt natural. People spoke with confidence that felt earned, even when it wasn't. They defended choices they no longer remembered making, and outcomes they no longer examined. When confronted with the past, they did not flinch. They explained it, calmly, thoroughly, correctly. There was no impulse to say, "I would not do that again." Only, "That is who I was." And because who they were no longer pressed against who they had become, identity stopped stretching. The self stabilized. It became coherent, consistent, reliable, and quietly incomplete. Eventually, something else changed. Regret began to feel inappropriate. To express it was to suggest your former self had failed. To apologize was to fracture your own narrative. To change too sharply implied error, and error, in this world, felt like betrayal. So people learned to stand by their past, not because it was right, but because abandoning it felt disloyal. Consistency became a virtue. Correction became suspicion. Growth slowed, not from resistance, but from loyalty to who one had been. People still changed, of course, but only gradually, quietly, without admitting why. Certainty became safer than humility, and harm no longer came from cruelty, but from confidence. This world did not fall apart. It stabilized. Conflicts repeated with remarkable accuracy, not because they were unresolved, but because nothing interrupted them. Without regret, there was no friction. Without friction, no redirection. The past stopped pulling people forward. It stopped insisting on change. History became detailed and inert. People felt calm, certain, unburdened, and strangely unchanged. Learning had once begun at discomfort. Now discomfort never arrived. Nothing was corrected because nothing was regretted. This record has been sealed. The world you live in still struggles to carry regret.